I'm Cass, a holistic practitioner and all-around weirdo. Join me as we explore the ultimate final frontier. Welcome to Cosmic Cowboy Roaming the Weird West. Saddle up, y'all.
Cool. Okay, welcome back to another episode of Cosmic Cowboy Roaming the Weird West. I have Diana Burke with me today. She is the mom of one of my good friends and has become a good friend herself. She is a professional astrologer and is it an emotional well-being coach? Was that what you called it?
Oh, yeah, it's essentially that's what it is. Empowerment coaching.
Empowerment.
And basically we deal with the emotions, and it's based off the emotional scale through Dr. David Hawkins. And it's the map of consciousness and power versus force, and and the energetic levels of the emotions that we tend to, vacillate between as we go through life, and it helps people shift to higher and higher levels so they can create and sustain change.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, and it definitely, astrology seems to factor in or like mesh well with it. I've noticed, at least from the coaching sessions we've done, because it seems you're able to pull on a whole other level with that. Is it common, like in that style of coaching, for people to be astrologers, have you found, or are you kind of unique in that sense?
I haven't found too many that are. Yeah. So when I was doing my program, I had sort of been dabbling in it, and then in the big initial program, I was all over the place, and when I got to a module about niche, I really that's when I kind of got my world open up, because I was doing more spiritual work then and dabbling with the cards, and then I ended up finding out about the astrology course with stars and cards. I had an astrology reading. I had been familiar with it, but I never thought in a million years it'd be something I could wrap my head around. But all of a sudden it was just like, oh my gosh, this would be the perfect niche along with the coaching. I just needed that extra thing I wanted to bring in so that I could help people even further. And it just allows me to share their blueprint and what's happening for them, in this lifetime. They come in with certain energies, and it's not like it's, very specific in the sense where we predict everything. I like to use the archetypes, and it can express in all kinds of ways. So I just like to help people express it in the highest version of themselves, and let them know that they can fall in love with who they are, and accept and get to know who they are at a core level.
That's it makes a lot of sense, because when we've done the sessions, like some of the stuff that's come up in my chart that that like my midheaven being in Gemini, for instance, like I've always felt like something must be wrong with me, because I have a really hard time staying in one job doing one consistent thing, and always thought it was maybe like some sort of dysfunction within myself. But seeing that my midheaven's in Gemini, and like what you've told me about it, like it makes so much more sense as to why my career has gone the way it has, because I can't really stay in one thing.
Yes, exactly. Like for that reason, exactly. Like this whole like thinking, because of sometimes your upbringing and what, who and what your parents are, or your family of origin, or your immediate caregivers, who and they were, and what they shared with you, and the environment you grew up in. Often we've had these expectations projected on us of who we're going to be. And we can come into this world not at all like our families of origin, and who and what we're supposed to do in this world. And I mean, that's exactly it. Like for you to say that, I thought there was something wrong with me. So you go through, like, it's so helpful. That's why I love working with the younger, people, like, from that young adult age and up into the, Saturn return and a little beyond too, when you start to really come into your own, to help you navigate, like, what is it that I'm supposed to do, and give you that validation and clarification that what's calling to you in your soul is the truth. It's not what other people are telling us who we should be. And yeah, you are going to be a dabbler. You're also probably maybe like, I mean, you have a lot of air, so you like to use, that communication, and it's going to be, bits and pieces of information and different various jobs, and maybe two at the same time, and like all kinds of things that you can go, okay, that's who I am, and
Yeah.
be happy with that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really given a lot of clarity. Same with like the North Node, South Node stuff that you were telling me about, like just knowing kind of like why I'm headed the way I'm headed kind of thing. Like, I never really wanted to, I didn't grow up being like, oh, I want to be a holistic healer when I grow up, or have any interest in it. It was actually something like I really strongly fought against because my mom was interested in it. And then seeing my North Node, I think it's in Sagittarius.
Yeah.
And like that just makes so much more sense as to why I've always been drawn to these aspects of life that I've tried to hide away, like, being interested in like spooky stuff as a kid, and then getting into high school, and that wasn't cool to be interested in ghosts and Bigfoot, so I didn't tell anybody that I was interested in that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's always been like a consistent thing within my life that I've like fought against, but it keeps coming back and coming up. And like we were talking about the other day, one thing that I've noticed in astrology circles in general is that people tend to want to say like your North Node is like your career path. Same with like, I mean, your midheaven more so, but like your North Node's like your career path. Like that's how you're gonna, go through life and like make your money and everything. But like we were talking, it's more like your purpose here, not necessarily how you're gonna make your money. It can be entirely unrelated to how you make your money. And like that clarification too, even just like reading astrology stuff casually and being like, oh, my North Node says this, so like this must be my job. It's actually been really helpful in the last like month or two, when now I've shifted from being a holistic practitioner full-time to doing it part-time and like working just a normal job to make ends meet kind of thing.
Right.
It's relieved a lot of tension there, because in my mind I'm like, oh, I'm not working in the career that's my life purpose, therefore I'm failing at this. But like we had discussed, it could just be that's something that I do in my spare time, or like that's where my passion really lies. But making money is a different aspect entirely.
Well, yeah, and like we were like I had just mentioned, it can be both and, right?
Yeah.
Because you sometimes you're going to get different things from those particular jobs and the particular work that you're doing out in the world, and some of it it needs to be built upon, and then some of it you need to build upon what you are passionate about. And yeah, so I mean, and the nodes, just for clarification, like they, in different astrology, traditional compared to Indian, compared to more modern, the nodes have different, or evolutionary, the nodes have different meanings. But the meaning that I resonated with going with, that they are these calculated points. They're the nodes of the moon are calculated points. They're not planets, and they give guidance. And they're very, of course, connected to when they're near the sun and the moon, or eclipse energy, and that is very, very fated energy. And so it's been referred to like the Rahu can be as the North Node, it can be the dragon's head in Vedic astrology, and K2 is the dragon's tail. And so, I mean, yes, it can have something to do with, like you say, your career, but it actually can have a lot more to do with how your lives feel fulfilled and aligned. And it's not about like completely leaving one behind and bringing in the other. It's about how you integrating. So you may find like with your your South Node, you come in with these feelings of certain things just being really easy for you and comfortable and familiar, and like you can just it's your inherent gifts and talents that you can do to be of service out in the world in some way or fashion. And it's like that backpack that you come in with, and then basically as you kind of get into that later 30s, I mean, you have a nodal return at 19, so sometimes you have that shift, but then you have the other one in your later 30s. You're like usually kind of shifting a little bit more, and you might notice that you're feeling this need to shift somewhere between say that later 30s into early 40s, and and then integrating the North Node, which is there's just that yearning and calling for you to do something, but it's very it's very unfamiliar, and you can feel like a wobbly toddler when you're doing it, right? Like it's like it's can be uncomfortable. So sometimes you're working towards it. Like I had that experience. You're working towards it, but you kind of are, don't know how to quite get there. And so that was with me with a Pisces North Node. I came in with Virgo, right? Virgo of like being of service and knowing how to do all the details and organizing and tracking and, just doing the work, the day-to-day work. And I just knew, how to do certain things in that regard. Being a very, spiritual person and connecting to all these different tools that we have in divination and expressing myself as a more, spiritually connected person was not familiar at all, and nor was it my upbringing. So, that's just a for instance. But if that helps give some explanation of the nodes for anybody, so that they, know that it's not a, sometimes you hear completely leaving that and moving on to this. It can be very integrated, and it's just gives you a sort of an idea of where it is that you might have a soul calling to, and not be scared of it, to move towards it rather than away from it.
Do you find like I guess if people are fighting the North Node, like is there aspects that you could see in charts where might indicate that someone would fight their North Node more strongly than others?
I can't say that I can answer that. Maybe a more experienced astrologer could answer that if there was certain aspects. But I will say that I had that experience, that I was fighting it.
Yeah.
And I will say, because the nodes are connected to fated things, that if you fight it too much, the universe kind of steps in, and it sort of really gives you that push in that direction if you're not bringing it in. It's sort of like, you take one step towards the gods per se, and they take 10 steps towards back at you. And I mean, I wandered around with my Neptune in the 10th house confusion, asking, like, what is it that I'm supposed to be doing here? And, it was there all the time, but I didn't pursue it until now, in this last few years, where I finally buckled down, took the certifications, finally found my way to the astrology. I mean, that wasn't totally there before at all. I always paid attention to, reading the horoscope, but when you're reading the horoscope, you're reading your sun sign, and most of the horoscopes are actually based off your rising sign, where they put the rising sign in the first house and read based off where the house, where the transits are in that house. So if anybody's listening and they are looking at all the general forecasts on social media, that a lot of times it's better to be based off your rising sign first. Sun second.
Yeah, that was kind of a game changer for me to find out, even just your rising and moon sign, like it changes a lot for you. And it's really cool to see like a lot of people getting into astrology now. Even like I saw the other day, or I heard on the radio, that McDonald's has started using like astrology references in their advertising. So like when Mercury retrograde was on, it was saying something, I can't remember the ad, but yeah, McDonald's referenced Mercury retrograde in an ad, and it just kind of made me giggle that it's become such a like mainstream thing now. Like,
yes,
on like dating apps, like most people, or a lot of people anyway, I've noticed will list like their sun, rising, and moon signs in their profile, which just kind of sends me for a laugh, because yeah, even just a couple of years ago, it wasn't nearly as big as it is now.
No, it just is, it's amazing. I'm like, oh my goodness. And then to talk to the young people, and like they know their sun, moon, and rising. I mean, I didn't even know my rising sign until I actually got into my actual class studying astrology. I I had a time frame of, and I never even knew the importance of it at all. And I had a time frame, and that could have allowed 4 different rising signs. And I
Wow.
kind of shimmied things around until I was kind of certain what my rising sign was. And I was shocked that it was actually Aquarius, because the funny part is that Sun Aquarius people, I always found them hard to connect with, which makes sense because the Aquarius energy is like very detached, and I was like, how come they're so different? Like, and here I'm a rising Aquarius rising sign. I'm like, oh, and I love it. I love it. And it's definitely makes sense with my astrology interests too, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess like right now we're in Venus retrograde shadow phase. So I guess, do you want to go into that a little bit and just explain? I feel like we heard a lot about Venus retrograde itself, but I haven't heard much about the shadow phase.
Okay. Yeah. So on July 22nd, Venus went retrograde, and that's a 40-day cycle where it's actually retrograde. However, on June 5th, we had the Venus entering that sign of Leo. So and then on June 8th, way back in June 8th, it squared the nodes. So speaking of the nodes, it squared the north node in Taurus, and so that was kind of not the initial, actually the initial part of the shadow was not until the 19th of June, and that's where it was at 12 degrees 12 minutes. So that's the point where when it retrograded back to. So on the 19th of June, it crossed that point. On the 13th of August, because of course it stationed retrograde at 28 degrees 36 minutes on the 22nd of July. And then on the 13th of August is when it crossed and met the sun, where it had the conjunction. So it became the morning star, went from the evening star to the morning star and across that ecliptic. And then it, on September 3rd, it stationed direct. And so we were at that, at later degrees. And then it actually, so once it stations direct at like 12, because it had gone backwards all the way back to that 12 degrees, right? And 12 minutes, then it starts that trek forward, and it starts to cross all those degrees that it once crossed. And at the same time, it's also making the aspects that it already, may have made on the way and then back and then the third pass, right? So we are like just moving to that, now that end degrees of where it got to at 28 and 28 degrees on about October 6th. It'll then be moving on into new degrees at that later part of Leo. And then finally, October 8th, it goes, Venus then enters Virgo. So we've had this Venus in Leo for a long time, right? It's been, because Venus entered Leo way back in June. So that's a long, long time, right, for it to be there. Yeah. So Now, during that time, Venus is to do with love, intimacy, pleasure, what we value, our money matters, our creativity, our personal preferences, romance, relationships in any sort, romantic, friendly, business, and then how we were reflecting uh, on ourselves and what we value, and it's sort of like what, who, and what thing and what situation do you love, and how much do you love it? And so we often have a lot of things that kind of come to light during that retrograde time. Sometimes there's relationships can start during that time and then fizzle out after it's passed on, because it's sort of like you were caught up in a situation that when it goes forward, you're like, oh, wait a minute, maybe this isn't exactly what I know and love. And it can be things too with, aesthetics too, like whether you painted something, a color, and you're like, oh, never mind, or, changed your hair, or changed your wardrobe, or, did, even small things like that. But it is very much about relationship too. So
Yeah, I had heard a lot of like a lot of breakups occurring during Venus retrograde, like a lot. And one of the main things I was hearing about was because Barbie was released on the first day of Venus retrograde.
Right.
And I was hearing a lot about like women going with their male partners to go see Barbie.
Yeah.
And then the partner's not really understanding the point behind the movie, about how, addressing certain issues of feminism, and, men not understanding, why their female partners were crying over this movie and stuff. And now, like, how men felt about the Barbie movie is like become this like litmus test for potential partners, which is kind of interesting. I've heard like it's just speculation that Venus retrograde was chosen for the release date of Barbie because they had an astrologer on staff. I've just heard rumors of that, but apparently it's a fairly common thing within like politics and within Hollywood to align movies to different astrological events, which I didn't realize. But it really seems like I've been hearing a lot more about like the divine feminine and like a lot more focus on that since Venus retrograde, just in general, between like astrology focused people, but also outside of astrology, like, just with like holistic people and like witchy people in general. Like there's been a big shift to focusing on the feminine and like aspects of the feminine and how it's expressed.
Right.
Which has been pretty fascinating to witness. It's always been a focus to some extent, but I've noticed too, like some people are focusing really hard on like Aries and Lilith within astrology as well, and like those aspects in regards to Venus retrograde too, which has been really cool to witness, because like I didn't even consider other stars outside of like our main planetary bodies and stuff like that.
Right.
On the chart, like there's so much more that you can add in there.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and to see like how it all compounds together. Like, yeah, Venus retrograde is happening, but also, here's like 6 other like mythologically based female astrological bodies factor in, and like the archetypes. And I know a little bit with like the shadow phase of Venus retrograde. People have been talking about more like Lilith, Kali, Eris, that sort of thing, and like that sort of focus in how how it played out during the Venus retrograde, and now like the after effects in the shadow phase. So I guess like with the shadow, like obviously like people like aesthetics and like romance and everything was big during Venus retrograde. So during the shadow phase, like are you watching more for say like a reconsideration of the choices made during the Venus retrograde? Is that more?
I would say that and sort of, what was the theme and what was the story around all of the transits that happen. I mean, of course, it's interesting. I'll go back to touch too on the fact that you were saying that, maybe the Barbie movie was intentionally aligned, maybe it wasn't, but it either way, it was aligned with the energy, and energy is energy, right? So, and back in our traditional time, it was actually the kings and the queen or the kings who they had astrologers, and it was only like in our patriarchal system that it became kind of that unacceptable. But of course, we're seeing all of that kind of crumble now with the Pluto leaving that Aquarius. It's really Pluto sitting at the very end, or leaving that Capricorn structure, top down, big business, government, institutes, and Pluto sitting at that late degrees, 27, 28 degrees right now. And it will actually be one of the planets going forward first, the outer planets. We were in, just so you know, and everyone knows, we were in a period of time there, right in kind of the beginning of September before Jupiter went retrograde. And we had like all the planets besides Mars in retrograde. So we had, and including Chiron. And so, I mean, the sun and the moon don't go retrograde. So we had Venus and Mercury, and Mars was the only inner planet that wasn't. And, Jupiter went kind of retrograde right then, but the Pluto, Neptune, Chiron, Uranus, Saturn, and then the two inner planets. So we were in this really kind of, reflective time anyway, with everything sort of, stewing and trying to figure out, probably where we were going and how we were going forward. And on top of it, we have that Leo energy. That Leo energy is very dramatic. It's theatrical, right? It's bold. It likes to be the leader. It likes to be seen. It likes to shine, but also can be, the one that likes to take people with them when they're shining, right? It's it is like that big picture screen, and the epic motion picture, and can be also very grandiose, very connected to courage and loyalty, and the shadow side can be that we can also people can be too grandiose, right, and have that I guess more overconfidence type of energy too. But for the most part, it's wanting to be, they have pride, right? That kind of feeling. And at the time, though, it is a very fiery, emotional energy. And so, and Venus in there, of course, is all about the love. So we actually had that same energy, just so people, if they want to go back, closest in 1999, because Jupiter was also in Taurus then. But the last time it because it works on a 5-pointed star, and so the last time we had the Leo, Venus in Leo retrograde was 2015. So we can go back between July 26th and September 6th. We had that Venus retrograde in Leo. And prior to that, the one we had Venus retrograde in Leo was 2007. So, I mean, 1999, of course, that's, well, my daughter was actually born in that year. And so now I'm kind of wondering what the theme is for, I guess this one was her and I still living under the same roof, right? And that relationship dynamic being more challenging during that time. It's like time for us to change, a lot of shifting and growing. And I mean, it's not like we've always been under the same roof. It's just like, okay, so now what happens now that we've moved past our time where everyone had to, was kind of moved back home and lockdowns and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's kind of the theme that came up. Also a major relationship and energies around relationship and wanting to, uh, potentially, move on, so that, like, for her to get into a relationship. And I know in 2015 I had one ending.
Hmm.
So there was, yeah, that theme was definitely there. So that's how it showed up in my life. Now, the really big theme throughout this that's going to be in effect here in the next day or so, because we're close to the 29th of September, where we're having a full moon in Aries, which is a very fiery full moon. And right after that full moon, we're having our third and final square of Venus in Leo to Uranus and Taurus. So the
Okay.
first one we had was July 2nd. And the second pass of that was on August 9th, right around 22 degrees. And then the third pass of that now is on the 29th of September at 22 degrees, 40 minutes of Venus squaring Uranus, and the Venus in Leo, the Uranus in Taurus. So what's, coming up for you in those particular houses? And that square brings up emotions of tension. It can be frustrating. It's Uranus, so it's an energy that wants more freedom, more independence. It wants to break free from whatever it is that they, are feeling like they've, value more, have the desire for, and it can be very dramatic because it is in Leo. But it's Uranus, so it also is going to deliver some sort of truth, like in an instant, like things will just be clear. So even if you were kind of, struggling with some of these, your values and relationship, or anything you love, or your pleasure, all that sort of, partnership energy of Venus in the summer, you might all of a sudden wake up and have like extreme clarity. And especially with that I am energy of Aries full moon, it's illuminating that too. And so those are, within hours of each other. So looking back at those dates, July 2nd, August 9th, and then, seeing what kind of theme comes up that might shake things up, uproot something. You might have some sort of breakthrough, something exciting and electric and sudden and shocking. And it's like the lightning bolt, a place where you can be liberated and freed, and, and this kind of shifting away from something, in an old conventional way, and bringing in a new opportunity that's from the heart. And that Venus and Leo, a heart-based sort of liberating energy, right? It's going to allow for, um, well, actually, it's up to you to allow for some space for that to happen, and to breathe, and to allow yourself some flexibility in your schedule for some of these sudden, shocking, potentially shocking changes that are, or breakthroughs, or downloads of like clarity of like, this is what I want, and this is what I'm going to do. And it's, maybe during that Aries full moon, I mean, it wants to initiate things, but maybe not taking like immediate action in the sense of a reaction, because Aries can be very combative and conflicting, and, they competing energy. So and fiery. So you want to make sure that you allow yourself some time and space for that to come through. So that was one particular transit that's really culminating right now, and has potentially a real major theme of change with it.
And
So,
sorry, that is occurring during Venus retrograde's shadow still, or it's
yes, yes,
okay.
yeah.
So like,
Yeah,
in my
with Leo
mind,
and
what
shadow.
that sort of says is like maybe a sudden desire to react in opposite to something that maybe occurred during Venus retrograde, but maybe like slowing the roll a little bit and like stepping back and taking a little bit of time to consider before reacting, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. But
interesting.
however, we have to keep in mind that Aries is initiating energy, and we also have to keep in mind that in 2 weeks from now we have some, very faded ecliptic energy happening in that opposite axis of Libra, right? And we also have to keep in mind that with this Aries full moon, with the Uranus square coming, or the Venus Uranus square coming in right after it, the full moon is also being affected by, we have our sun in Libra, and with that is the south node, and the south node is is conjunct Mars, right? So we have that particular thing happening too. So what what is it that we might be letting go of there too in that particular house for us, in your Libra house? And or just maybe having a different outlook on something. Could be your belief. It could be just whatever that south node energy is wanting to shift now and it's happening right along with that Aries, and it's being illuminated by that Aries full moon. So yeah, so that's interesting as well. And so there also was during that time we had the Mercury retrograde, right? Which for some people was, seemed to be really difficult because it was both the inner planets, and maybe for others it wasn't as much because it actually was in Virgo, and Mercury of course is exalted in Virgo. So it just depended, but that it entered Virgo, Mercury entered Virgo, and on the 28th of July, and it does move relatively quickly, and of course slows it down when it's in retrograde, but it entered its shadow on August 4th at 8 degrees, and then it stationed retrograde on the 23rd of August, and it spent its 3 weeks in retrograde there in up until the 15th of September, where it stationed at 8 degrees again, because it was up at 21 degree, and then it went backwards to 8, and then so we're just about to leave shadow of that on the end of September at 21 degrees, and then October 4th it moves on into Libra. So there was that was going on at the same time, which
So what do you find like the Mercury retrograde shadow phase? What sort of characterizes that phase?
It's of course the degrees that have already been passed through, and it's not as strong as that 3 weeks in retrograde, I find. But I find, like, for me, there may be just some little hints of things, whether it be some confusion in communication, or um certain things that kind of mechanical thing that's not a big deal that might come up, or something like that. And it's just being mindful of that. It's not like you don't stop. It's not like you stop doing everything in your life and making decisions or going forward, but you just have to. It's just a matter of knowing, like, okay, the energies are kind of shifting. I have to, if I'm going to make a decision, I have to make sure that this decision is, something I've really thought through. I've really, dotted the I's and crossed the T's. And, when we're in the shadow periods, it's sort of like, just make sure you do that double check on whatever it is that you are thinking of doing, probably, or maybe that email that you're sending out, or whatever it might be. I just always kind of keep it in the back of my mind, but I definitely don't give it a really, right in retrograde, because I am ruled by Mercury. I do tend to know, I'm like, okay, everybody, my communication might be a little wonky. Like something you thought you totally didn't have wrong, and you're like, how did I type that? Like, those sorts of things I'll find happen. So, yeah. Yeah. So,
cool.
Yeah. Another, another thing that we had the Venus, like a Cazimi, the Venus retrograde that was the Mercury conjunct Venus. So that was on July 27th. That one happened. And another aspect that we had was, so we had the Kazemi with that Venus on August 13th, and that's when we saw her change to the morning star.
Can you just briefly summarize what a Kazemi is? I'm not.
A Kazemi is when they're like conjunct within a very small degree, like of minutes. So it's not even just a degree, but it's like within 17 minutes. So it's like it's in the heart of that particular planet. They're like right, and there's just a certain amount of time when they're right together. And with the Venus, like if you see the ecliptic, you saw the Venus with it retrograde and it crosses over, right? So it was an evening star, and then it becomes a morning star during that Venus retrograde and crosses that ecliptic. And in the meantime, it has connected directly in the heart of the sun. So during that time, it's that halfway point between the Venus retrograde, and so it kind of reflects some parts of that journey, and it's a great time sometimes to kind of find that real connection to your heart, or you just might find that you get a real good insight or download too about something in particular, because our sun is our core essence. It's our life voice energy. It's what really brings us energy. And then of course the Venus is what we love, right? So it's just really finding that connectedness between your heart and your creativity and your energy of what you want to put out in the world. And it's just really illuminated, I think, at that moment in time. You can pay attention when we're in those phases to see if anything comes up. And then the 14th actually of August, right after that, was Venus in retrograde trining Chiron. So, and we had
I heard that was a fairly big transit for some people.
Yeah, and of course, like this all depends on everybody else, their individual charts, right? But the first pass of it was on June 29th, so you could look back at that date, and then another one was the 23rd of September, and it was around that 18, 19 degrees. So this could have been like just a really hopeful alignment with healing, with a lot of deep healing and bringing in a lot of love and reconnection with love. And especially if you've been involved in some sort of discord that arose and there was some like other, it's sort of, where's those wounded parts of self, and how do you bring in the really profound healing with a lot of love and a lot of wisdom that you're getting, through all the other energies that were happening, understanding yourself from that really deep and meaningful and, respectful place, and feeling safe in order to do that deep healing work, and as well as some self-expression and, operating from our heart center and integrity, and having some really heart-to-heart conversations and being very vulnerable. And it could, bring a lot of wisdom in and a lot of fruitful yields of healing, and to help strengthen relationships and friendships and that sort of thing. And we had a shift in our family it was a very small one, but there was a shift over this period of time that's taken years to get to. Yeah. So, yeah. So I know for some, if they look back at those dates, June 29th, August 14th, and September 23rd, there might be another theme there too, as well. And Venus also moved through a square to Jupiter on June 11th, August 22nd, and September 17th. And this square was, it's the benefics, right? So, a lot more jovial, and yes, it's a square, so there is that tension there, but it can offer some feelings of, bringing some more beauty and harmony and togetherness and abundance and support and blessings, and, the symmetry of that, Venus, and expanding on that. Jupiter is the expansion, right? Expansive energy of the love, beauty, art, money, value, self-worth, luxurious items, pleasures, material possessions and desires, beautiful things in our life. And it can bring in more harmony and growth and abundance. And also because it's Jupiter connected to, our higher mind and higher knowledge and spirituality. And
That's interesting. I hadn't
that sort of
considered
thing.
the date of that one because I leased my car September 16th, so September 17th was like the first day I could really go out and use it. And yeah, it really lines up with that because a lot of stuff came up for me, like addressing like scarcity mindset sort of stuff with that of
Right.
like that day I was like filled with like fear of like, oh my goodness, did I do the right thing? I'm spending so much money on this, but
Yeah.
I don't have a choice. I need a car. Like it was it was a good tension in some aspects because
Right. It's
like
going to open
it's
doors for you and help you have
it's like the next step kind of thing that has to happen, but at the same time it's a big step and it's scary and it's a big commitment. But it was like a blessing with tension, basically. Exactly how you described it. So that's interesting. I hadn't considered that date. I did consider like this is the first time I've really ever specifically chosen a day based on astrology, but I knew when Mercury retrograde was ending, so I picked the day that we picked up our car on the day after it ended because I knew I was looking at a lot of contracts and stuff. So I next day. So that's interesting. I hadn't considered the Jupiter aspect with that. So that's
the
cool.
Venus square, and can bring like the, good luck and good fortune and feeling like enthusiasm and divine inspiration and creative things and actions and that ability to set our intentions too. Just have to make sure that it wasn't too big or too excessive in whatever that we did. You put a lot of thought in whatever you were doing by getting this car and what benefits it's going to bring for you, right?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
So that's the only. I mean, they're the benefics. So even though it's in a square, that's about the only like shadow side of it, I guess, is that if you are bringing in all this wonderful things for it to just be a little too excessive is all. But most of the time you can work through that anyway.
Yeah. So with this full moon, like if someone's wanting to like do some work on the 29th here kind of thing, like what do you usually do for that? Like are you looking at like what house your Aries is in kind of thing and what like where your Mars is at and then kind of focusing on like your intentions there in relation to those, or like how would you?
Well, I mean, of course, the intention time setting was actually back in the new moon of Aries new moon, right? So back in go back to like March 21st when we had the new moon at 0 degrees and 50 minutes of Aries, and then we had the other one that and it was a hybrid solar eclipse. So at 29 degrees 50 minutes of Aries on April 19th. So those were the new moon, maybe areas where we were setting intentions. And I know for me back then, that's when I was actually, I spent some time initiating my vision board, because I did create one in January, but I did some more tweaking of it and more initiation of it. And now I had a few little changes, but I haven't had anything really, really, really significant, except I do see a lot of things happening with this full moon where I'm feeling that, I'm feeling the shift, like even connecting with you and connecting, with, some clients, and then also doing some other work in this regard, which is my work in the world. And it's like I said, it's been a little bit awkward for me to move into, being an online, having myself out there as, as an astrologer, because that's not how I grew up, or working on, social media platforms. I think, it's easier, of course, for all you young people with lots of Neptune. But it actually is part of my chart too. I have Neptune in the 10th house and a Pisces second house, so I see it there too. So anyway, getting back to the full moon, I don't really do too much for a full moon because it's a completion, it's a culmination. I don't set any intentions for it. I just allow the time and space, and I may, just sit with my own, my own little space, and with my own cards, and or take some notes on certain things, and do that kind of thing. But I don't I don't often really do a big time ritual myself on a full moon, besides go out and actually spend time under the moonlight, and maybe take some photos of it and enjoy the illumination of the moonlight, and see what kind of comes to pass. And especially with this one, because the Uranus square is there, anything's possible. So it's more allowing time and space in your schedule, and allowing yourself a chance to breathe and be the observer and respond and not react if some sudden things come up that are like, oh, okay, well, you know what, I planted these seeds way back then, or all of a sudden my life's changing, or something's ending, and I guess I got to go with it. Like, I know for me, I was presented something so out of the blue already, like, you got to make this happen now.
Mhm.
And it's a very significant cost to do so. However, if things go the way that they were headed to, I'm like, oh, this is going to be so much better, because I'm going to be able to be more hands-on with the project, right? Because it's way closer, and I've been kind of trying to get it so that it's been, something I can actually physically, it not be so far away from me where I can't be involved. So I don't need to get into the details because it's another totally completely different business. But it's yeah, it's like, you got to make it happen now, and I'm like, how? But I was faced with that back in 2019, and the how just came because I wanted to do it, and it got offered to me to just happen, and I was able to do it. And it's been a project sitting on the back burner since then. And now I'm able to bring it even closer to me. So is it time to make it happen now? Very possibly.
Yeah.
And the ending of that time that, it's been kind of lingering in the background, maybe here. And maybe it's suddenly going to happen. I don't know, but I'm just like, okay, well, I had a conversation, and we'll see how it goes, and see what's next. We just, day to day. But it's not like sitting there going, oh my gosh, like, I don't know, I can't make this happen. It's sort of like, how
Mhm.
how is this all going to come together? And now going back to 2005 into 6, when the nodes were also in the Aries Libra axis, some people who are old enough can look back also of how the energies of that time played out. And actually, that's when Shelby and I moved here. That's when Shelby and I got this house built and moved back to our close to the farm here. So yeah, that 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 is another transit that is definitely in the works, and the full moon is got this very interesting Uranus energy. So expect the unexpected is all I'm going to say. And instead of reacting, respond, compromise, allow, watch your fiery emotions, um, you know, getting involved. There could be some, frustration and that kind of thing that wants to arise. So you just have to work through it the next couple of, of, of days, or the days around the full moon, is what I would say.
Okay.
But yeah. So that is kind of, as far as the major dates that had some themes around them. Besides, on the 30th of September, there's like a Mercury that's trining Uranus. And so Uranus is often said to be the higher octave of Mercury. And it's about, those, like, that sudden, kind of download, thought that might, inspiration, the light bulb comes on type of thing. And, Mercury being our mind, our thought processes, our ideas. So there could be also some news you receive, some communication, could be the right place, the right time, a connection, the right person, communication, breakthrough, original ideas or new ways of thinking, or just a major, download that comes like in an instant. And it's sort of like having the awareness that when these sort of lightning strikes happen with thoughts and ideas, and that there might be some serious clarity that comes through to, let that happen. It could be very enlightening. It could be a resolution to an issue, for positive growth or some sort of change in energy, and or an integration of some sort. But it's just a matter of, if that's happening, to do what you can to stay grounded, keep your feet in the ground, allow yourself to stay flexible, do the deep breathing, and allow that and hold that vision of what it is, but also keep balance with that very electric energy. Yeah.
Okay. And sorry, when did you say the eclipse is again? It's October 14th.
Yeah. So that's another whole subject in itself, and I'm not quite sure how that's all, what will be involved there. But the eclipse is October 14th, and then the end of October.
Okay. And they're both half eclipses, or one's a full and one's a half?
So October, I just have to see if I can. So the October 14th is the as a solar eclipse at 21 degrees, and the October 28th is a partial lunar eclipse.
Okay.
Yeah.
What signs are they?
The October 14th is in Libra.
Okay.
And the partial lunar eclipse is in Taurus.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting, because Libra, of course, now is that relationship in the opposite axis of this Aries full moon. So I mean, honestly, this could be sort of an insight of what's coming about with that eclipse. Of course, it's eclipse energy, so we don't really know what's going to happen. It's fated. And that Taurus one is interesting too, because that's where this Uranus and Jupiter are coming together very slowly. That's a big energy for next spring. So,
okay.
And that's where we're getting a lot of shakeups in our, financial areas, and the food industry and all these kinds of things. So yeah, it's that one can be very interesting as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sounds like we've got like a lot going on really fast, like within the next 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, and you just said the key word. You know how I follow Heather Eland.
Yeah.
She was actually one of my teachers. I just don't just follow her. So her little, if you wanted, I can read her little blurb of how she is looking at this Aries moon.
Yeah, go for it.
So her perspective on it is that we can be prone to pushing too hard, too much, being way too active, and you're taking action, too quickly on something. Or for people who are just pushers, they just want to push through everything. That can be bringing about a lot of feeling of burnout, especially if you have a lot of cardinal energy. So, and then this exhaustion may not be just on a physical level. They may be feeling it on an emotional and psychological level as well. So the Aries fiery supermoon is like very emotionally charged. So there'd be a lot of emotions that are involved. Like that's a totally different thing, right? Than say if the moon was actually in Libra and it was the opposite with the sun in Aries, it wouldn't be, it'd be like, yeah, we're initiating something, but you'd have that Libran balance there, right? With the moon in Aries, that emotions are running very high, can be very intense and potentially very, very fast as well. So that when you said fast, like we will very likely feel that this energy is moving really quickly, like it's really uninhibited, and it's not being aspected by a lot of things. As mentioned, we just have that South Node Mars energy going on, and then the Uranus square after. But the actual moon itself not aspected by too much, so it's open to, be a big, bold, expressive, and we'll to do with our own thing, right? Aries, I am energy, our own agency, to do what we want to do, and look out. Like I want to do what I want to do, but wanting to push forward too much is maybe a little bit detrimental if you're already feeling exhausted, right? But you don't have to worry about anything in the way of anything you want to sort of take that initiative energy on. Just be mindful of your intensity with it, and allow the feelings to come up, and then also think of the other, right, the opposite of that Libra. And but things can be, and people's expressions can be, and how they communicate with you can be very abrupt and can be very jarring, and because people are being more able to just say what they feel really a lot more directly, and so you just have to keep that in mind when people are saying things to you that might hurt your feelings or might be more combative. They're just being like outward expressive, right? And just know the energy will pass. So rather than getting in a full on brawl or argument or anything over, you just have to take some breaths through anything that might come up that has the potential to evoke an argument or dispute or disagreement or fight, or and it's going to be going on for this next couple of weeks, but we may feel like we just have this a lot of impulsive energy, and it can be moving at a very, very fast pace. So allow that to be, and then the Mars, of course, will be conjuncting the node. So yeah.
Okay. So we had this same or similar eclipse back in June, was it? Like, do they I can't there was a Libra eclipse, was there not?
That particular last eclipse, no, I thought that one wasn't in Aries. It wasn't in Aries. That particular eclipse was well, we had that one in April.
April, right? That's what I'm thinking of, yeah.
Of 19th. That was an Aries eclipse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a hybrid one. Yeah. That Aries eclipse energy.
So like that eclipse and this eclipse, like, are we seeing any sort of mirroring? Like, were there things that were going on then that we should be watching for now, kind of thing?
Well, in a way, yes, because of course that was like new moon time, right?
Right, okay.
Right? So we were kind of planting, certain seeds back then, and those eclipse energies last for about 6 months, right? So now we're going to be going into another one. So this Aries full moon might be illuminating and kind of completing and closing up what might have been initiated back then, and then we'll be shifting into that Libra eclipse to initiate a whole new 6-month energy of the eclipse season ahead. So yeah, like it'd actually be interesting to speak with you again to see, like, now that you could sit with some of that to see, okay, what's coming up then, and then what happens, especially with this shocking Uranus, changes or shifts or downloads or insights or what might happen there, and then what might come about with the eclipses in addition to that in the opposite axis to the Aries with that Libra eclipse. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's definitely gives you a lot to watch out for. As we're saying all of this, I'm realizing like my need to keep a journal, even if it's just jotting down, you know, like,
Yeah.
oh, this event happened today and that's it. Like leave it there kind of thing,
Yeah.
just to be able to track it. I actually did see, I was in like a witchy store the other day, and they had a really cool like astrology diary. So
Yeah. Well, I was just going to show you this. You can order
yeah.
these online.
Ooh.
It's honeycomb.
Oh
It's
yeah,
called
I
a
remember you telling
honeycomb,
me about this.
and
Yes.
I told you about that before. Yeah, and I got mine the last time with all the asteroids. I got mine the last time. The first time I didn't. It has your solar return in it. It gives
Okay.
you all like you have like a full calendar type thing,
Neat.
or that your chart, and then you have like all the aspects on a calendar like this, and then like it's just the most perfect diary for me because it's set up just like I like them, with these like things you can, and then I got an extra page of notes too. But
Mm.
each date, it has like the actual mundane transits, and then it also has your own in blue. So it has
Cool.
your personal transits. Yeah, and it also has like the collective transits as well. So it is another thing that was part of our school with Heather, and as a recommendation. And at the first I got like a little 6-month PDF electronic version, and yeah, now I'm to the book. It's become my journal that I write in, and my note taking book for astrology, and it's become everything all in one for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I find it's really hard with astrology to like half-ass it. Like as soon as you start getting into it and like paying attention, you might like follow like your rising sign and sun sign, like you said. But then once you start getting into the transits and stuff and understanding all these different aspects, like you can spend so much time like analyzing like what's coming, and
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah, it might be time consuming, but like the insight that you get from it is just phenomenal. Like just a little bit of tracking that I have done for myself with like I've been trying to do like new moon, full moon kind of thing, and like looking back on like what came up when kind of thing. But like I didn't even realize the new moon in Aries 6 months ago, the full moon now. I never picked up on that connection myself. Like I've always just looked at like the immediate new moon, full moon within the month kind of thing. And yeah, like it's really
Like
definitely
paying attention to the whole cycle. Yeah.
yeah, when you start getting into the larger cycles, and especially once you start following different returns that you get as
Yes.
well. Like that's I
Yeah.
know, like for myself, my Saturn return was really, that was kind of what got me into astrology. And I think I'd started talking, I think I was talking on the phone to Shelby, and you were like, oh, let me have a look at your chart, and you had a glance at it and you had said something about the Saturn return, and so I looked into it. And that was kind of what started me down the path, was like realizing, oh my, like this is why all of this stuff is happening. Because it was at a point where like you're cognizant of, especially like for my age, like from like just looking back at different things that had happened in my life around the same times, like astrological times, I should say. It made so much more sense, because at that time during my Saturn return, I was like, okay, why is this happening again? Like this feels cyclical. What's going on? And I feel like until you have enough years under your belt, you can't really start to notice the cycles as easily. And then it feels like once you hit the Saturn return, you're cognizant enough to really start to notice, okay, something's going on. And yeah, I don't know, like if you were like, when you were that age for your first Saturn return, I don't know if you were really cognizant of it at the time or not, or if it was something you kind of noticed later. But
Cass, I have no idea about any of it. And that's my whole like why I'm so passionate about helping the young people in that, prior to and in and around the Saturn return. And why I love connecting with all you guys at your age group, because I needed this so badly, like so much, and I never had it. And so I was just, you know, I mean, I looked to my dad to help me get my choice. I mean, not everybody's like this. I was just like, I had no idea what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be, uh, what I wanted my work to be. And so, yes, I followed his direction, and then I got in there, and I'm like, oh no, this isn't for me. And and then I switched courses, and that happens to tons of people when they start, post secondary, where they get
Oh,
in and then realize, because all we have is a vision of what it could be, and you get in and you're like, oh, okay, wait a minute, and then you get more clarity. So
yeah, well, and it's interesting you say that too, because like I know for myself and a lot of my friends, like we went to school and not a lot of us switched degrees very much, but most of us, like midway through or past the midway point, like kind of almost too late, we realized like, okay, this isn't really what I want to be in, but we just continue because the cost of tuition is so high now that like if you're 3, 4, 5 years into a good degree, you don't want to go and switch and have to spend an extra 2 or 3 years catching up and everything because it's
yes.
and like right now, like I'm 29, most of my friends are around the same age, and everybody in my age group right now that I've noticed is going through a huge switch of like, okay, this is what I'd gotten my degree in, and now I want to do a complete 180 and go do something else.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's really a struggle for a lot of people my age because it's like, one, we feel like total failures. Like our parents are telling us, oh, well, at your age, I bought a house. At your age, I had a career that was already 10 years in. And, the way of living has just changed so much. It's just not even feasible anymore to do
No.
that. Like we're really in a big upheaval, I feel like right now in terms of everyone's career and just like
Yeah.
what people want out of life. And that was something that Shelby and I were talking about too, is that like,
Yeah.
there's a big shift to wanting to get back to the land and get back to sort of like simple living
Yeah.
away from corporate
Yeah.
career paths and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Like,
There you go.
nobody
That's
really
the
wants
Pluto
to.
leaving Capricorn.
Yeah.
That's it
Yeah.
right there. And getting back to the grassroots community, individual, collective, uh, gathering together from, all of your skills and all of your, exchange of resources and such, and working together collaboratively in community. Pluto in Aquarius, a grassroots up, that'll be our next 20 years. And that's why we're watching such a dismantle of what everyone knew of as the structures and the institutes and big business, big corporate. And it is a different world. And you are, and so you have to allow yourself to follow your passions mostly. If you're just going to go out and think you're, just going to do something to make money, I mean, you have to have that passion in behind it. It's just, you have to have that heart and soul in behind it. And not saying that, people didn't before. It's just that it was a totally different world. And I was no different. I bought a trailer home, but I bought a home that was on the farm at 24 years old, because that made more sense to do that than just renting in town or whatever. And I got a good job, and I was just able to go to the bank and get a loan and do that. It's not the same for you guys.
No.
It's not. And
Well,
so,
even renting nowadays is so hard. Like I
it's
looked at
more
this
than my
before.
mortgage.
Yeah. And talking to a lot of friends, like I've heard friends say relatively jokingly, like, oh well, 3, 4 of us should just go in and get a piece of land and get property and split the mortgage between us. And like that's really getting back to what things were like 200 so years ago. Was
Yeah.
really, I mean, we're creating families now versus just living within blood families, because I feel like there's been a lot of upheaval in terms of healing journeys for a lot of people, and like trauma within the last 3 generations, like the amount of generational trauma that's occurred, and to varying degrees depending on your background and various different factors. Like there's so much that's in one sense dividing us, but there's so much bringing people together now too that I've found as well. And for me, and like talking to Shelby before, she had said like, I'm optimistic about this sort of quote unquote end of the world. And I agreed with her. Like, I think it's going to be for the better in the long run. And you saying like the Pluto shift into Aquarius, you know, I think it's sort of like it's very much like the archetype of the death card in tarot is we're seeing the death of one system and the birth of another.
That's
And
right.
so it's terrifying for most people, but at the same time, like getting excited about the change and about what this might mean for
the transformation with
strategies.
it.
Yeah.
Pluto, and
And
Pluto can be very empowering. It is death and rebirth,
Yeah.
but it can be very empowering, and it's very exciting. And it actually is going to be stationing to go direct, and so then it starts its trek back to that Aquarius
When do you know when
axis.
that occurs?
Well, so it dives into Aquarius in January.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's, you know, it's basically going nowhere right now. It's just stationed, really, for the most part.
And that's really interesting, because that's what I felt too, is like things started to change, like with COVID, like things started to change, and it was really obvious of people being like, "Okay, this isn't working. We need to fix this." And then all of a sudden, it feels like everyone's like, "Oh, back to normal, haha." And like, but we know it's not normal, you know, with like the shipping and the economy and the food, all of the like very real world aspects that we can see it's not working, but we're just going to pretend that it is working until it fully breaks.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it stations direct, like actually on October 10th, and that's not very far away. But yeah, even around here, like we've, you know, changed some things. I used to have a garden way back when, and then I, you know, let it grow in. But, you know, I did start to dig things up again during COVID, and, you know, we may end up with a bigger garden, but we have a neighbor across the road. So
Shelby was telling me about him. He's very into regenerative agriculture.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And she was telling me about that, and I was like, oh my goodness, I need to come out there and meet that guy, because like it's something that I'm interested in, but in the city, like you're limited as to how much you can do it. And I find too a lot of this stuff, at least for me anyway, I learn better when I'm learning directly from someone when it comes to this sort of stuff. So it's I think it's going to be a really interesting shift over the next
for sure
couple months. I mean, it's going to be scary, but I think that's maybe why people are turning to astrology so much, is because now we kind of have an expectation of what's coming.
And then when they start to get the guidance, they're like, oh, this makes sense. Oh, okay, then I don't need to be so scared because this is what's supposed to be happening. And it's just a matter of like, you know, really like, what are we choosing here as this Pluto switches gears and we start to move into this whole new world. And Aquarius is innovation, technology. Yes, AI is going to be very present. Yes, these different kinds of the way we grow food and everything is going to be very present. But are you going to approach it from fear or from love? And are you going to go down all these rabbit holes? And I mean, you know, we would encounter people, because speaking of food, I ended up working with food at these markets. And, you know, so we have, you know, a particular family who has an orchard. Well, they started out with just the fruit from their orchard, but now they're collaborating. So they have the veggies from the different farms, and then they have a brother who's growing these veggies, and they have different fruit farms they're, you know, sourcing from. So everybody can just come and do their shopping of all their fruits and veggies in the one, you know, the one spot. And then, you know, other friends that are into the greens and the lettuces and the microgreens and the mushrooms and that's going to be indoor growing, right? And so I've connected with, you know, these particular hydroponic growers that are doing those kinds of greens and that kind of thing. But you know, it's just making sure you're not afraid of what is coming forth that is new and is changing. It's meant to change, and it's part of our evolution and our growth. And allow yourself to explore some new and different ways of being, and allow yourself, like, I kind of joked because I said to Shelby, or my whole theme, because I did take the chemical technology and was in that for the 20 years that I was now the from chemical to alchemy, the spiritual mama you never had, because I never had that. And I know lots of people, like, you know, people are still stuck in the, you know, go to get your university degree, which costs a fortune. And if people are in it, but then they get out and then they still don't have the ability to get work, or, you know, what is that going to bring you? You have to look at that. It's great to have a degree. I'm not putting that, you know, like, I'm not discounting that at all.
I think the
However,
learning that comes with the degree is phenomenal. Like, you know, my degree in archaeology, I don't regret that the learning that I underwent and like the experience that I gained, but I'm really noticing that degrees really don't hold the weight that they used to anymore. I mean, partially because everyone's got a degree, but also partially because I think just the way the job market is shifting.
yeah,
But yeah, no, I think it's definitely beneficial for people that do get the degrees because they have that area of knowledge and it really expands. You know, I don't think I'd be into the woo stuff in the way that I am if it wasn't for the archaeology degree and studying the mythology behind a lot of civilizations and the ritualistic practices of different cultures. But I think the way that people are using their degrees now is changing drastically. Like you're not
yeah,
coming out with a degree in whatever field and then getting a job in that field. You're usually coming out with a degree and then getting a job in a wildly different sector.
yeah, yeah. Very, very, very possible for a lot of people, and also the education is part of the systems and institutes that are having to shift and change because them operating from the same, place that they have. I think Pluto's going to do a number on that too, because everything's moving so quickly, and a lot of the jobs that are available, they don't even have like a curriculum developed for it, unless you're like, a really, innovative, or, I mean, I think maybe some of the polytechnical, because they're working with industry too, they might keep up a little bit, faster with their change pace on. But where are you going to get your training from? That, lots of these jobs are going to be online, and or more innovative, or you don't even know what it's going to be yet. I mean, you want to talk about all the new medical technologies that are, not that far away, that are kind of in the backgrounds, right? That
Well,
sort of thing.
I just saw an ad today for a thing called Chat CBT. So it's a chatbot that's specifically pulling on psychological research and made to act as a counselor for people that don't have access to counseling.
Right.
And like that's equally fascinating and terrifying to me. Like
Yeah, totally.
I'm so hesitant about AI. Like I think the idea of it's very interesting.
Mhm.
And actually, like as I'm saying this, I was thinking when you'd mentioned AI, I'm like, I wonder if anyone's done a chart for Chat GPT or like any like specific AI programs.
Yeah.
Just to see what's in their charts. And I wonder, you know, like what aspects and like what different bodies would play. Like, because I feel like, is it Pluto deals with technology? Which the one that deals with like online technology? That's Neptune? Pluto?
No, no, that is well, Neptune is film really more,
Oh, okay.
but Uranus is more the innovative. Uranus
Oh,
is more the innovative, and Aquarius is more
yeah.
about technology. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because I wonder, like for AI, like I wonder, like if certain planetary bodies might hold different weights within the charts
hmm
based on like the associations with technology and stuff. Like that would just be, I'm sure we will see a astrology for
we're gonna
AI.
have right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, some of the astrologers are talking about the innovation that's going to come with the astrology and the astrology
Mhm.
type softwares that are going to be available with this Pluto and
Mhm.
Aquarius. The Aquarius may bring a whole 3D perspective, because right now, of course, it's just been the 2D and all kinds of things.
Well, and
And
I even
we see it
saw,
move really quickly.
sorry.
I said, and like it's a 20-year cycle with that Pluto and Aquarius, but the technology, I feel like the innovation will be that much quicker.
Oh
Um,
yeah, no, for
right?
sure. I already saw the other day, I saw an article. There's a group that is using ChatGPT to translate whale. And so they're learning how to speak in whale so that it'll basically be you'll open a Google Translate app and be able to speak to animals,
Yeah.
which kills me because like I never thought that my job would be under threat from AI. But it
Right.
was talking about it how ChatGPT is already capable of learning a language and being able to speak in the language, but
Mhm.
it struggles to translate the language back to English. So
Right.
ChatGPT pretty much can already speak in whale, but we have no idea what it's saying to the whales,
Right.
which is
Mm.
again terrifying and fascinating.
Oh, yeah. All at the
But it
same
was
time. Yeah.
yeah, it was really neat because it's like wow, like this is like ChatGPT's been out for like what 2 years now, I think less than
Yeah.
that, And like the way that it's being used already is just phenomenal. And I don't think, like, even as a business person, like somebody who's regularly using AI to write their social media posts and their copy and everything, they can do so much more work than someone who isn't, like, just because time constraints. Like, you know, Chat GPT can spit out copy for you for a social media post in like 2 seconds. Whereas, like, you know, you might sit there for 15-20 minutes thinking about what you're going to write and then putting it, you know, how long it takes you, whatever.
Well, just even to initiate what you're going to write. So you have an idea and you're trying to like get this concept of this idea on paper, especially for somebody who isn't, you know, doesn't have all the air in their chart, or, you know, that it maybe sees more in images or that kind of thing. So at least it could give you the basis, and then you can add in your own personalized human touch, because you want your energy and it not just come from a robotic place too. Because energy is energy and people can feel that. And so I don't feel like we're going to lose that personal perspective or personal touch or that communication. And somehow we just have to use it to our advantage, but also then, you know, be mindful of people who are taking advantage of it, or taking advantage of you because of it. And, you know, just, I mean, we're going to have AI to control AI, I'm sure, and all that kind of stuff too, right? But
yeah, I think it's such, I don't even think we know where it's going to go at this point.
no,
Like, we're already, the innovations that are already coming, you know, I don't think anybody thought we were going to use AI to talk to animals. Like, that's just such a out of left field sort of thing. And I really wonder personally, like, I see a lot of reflections between like the paranormal and like the social media algorithm. Like, I see a lot of similarities between those two. And so I do wonder now with AI, like, what sort of, like, I wonder if there's going to be, like, is AI going to have paranormal experiences or something? Like, you know, there's so many different things that I'm just,
or help
it's going to
people
be interesting.
communicate with the other side, right? Like,
Yeah,
you
well,
know,
yeah, like with
that
you know,
mediumship. Like,
I wonder what might come with that.
all I know is, I mean, for me, that's a fascination. I have no idea. Like, I have 8th house Pluto in Virgo, but and 8th house Pluto, and I have a real fascination with mediumship. And I have I have so many people I know that are dead. And it's not funny, but it's like, actually, my neighbor was giving me a hard time about all my dead people that I know. Because even somebody who I was involved with business, and I started Googling and found out, like, oh, and I just had a little hint that maybe they're not here anymore. Not retired, but not here. And I Googled obituary of that person, and they were not here anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, and 65, and next week would be the 2-year anniversary that they passed away. And so they just, and I was, it's just like, oh my gosh, really? That
Is
person?
there, this is like left field entirely, but obviously, like, our star chart is based on our birth time. Is there anything for like doing star charts for someone after death based on their death time?
Oh, I'm sure there's people who dabble in all
Who do
of that.
Yeah. That would
I
be
think I
interesting.
might have even heard that. But and I know astrologers from an ethical perspective, even though some could probably really nail down, some really good ones could be, you know, maybe 70% accurate in nailing down, maybe even higher, somebody's death time or death, you know, or deaths that could happen. But they don't go there. They, you know, they don't like to go there at all, you know, because we do have, you know, from my perspective with that, there's some people that come in, you know, of course you come in with your life path, and you do have a life path purpose, that, and a calling, that and what your soul is calling to help you evolve and grow. And there are certain people whose deaths in that life path are to help teach others a certain thing, and there's no stopping it. But then there's some that have, you know, that situation where they can choose if they're going to stay or go, depending on the circumstance, and that they have the opportunity to, you know, and either, you know, choose choose to stay, choose to, be able to change some things in their life as part of their evolution. Um, and so there can be a window of time that happens. Like for instance, if somebody
Interesting,
gets somebody gets cancer and they, beat it type of thing, and then maybe beat it forever, or maybe until they live a long life until old age takes them, or it comes back again or something, or different things like that, if they don't change their path. You know what I mean? Not saying that
Yeah.
always you can have say in that kind of thing. That's not the truth either, right? So, but I find it, I'm very, very fascinated by mediumship and what happens with that spiritual connection, and what just I feel like it helps people in the guidance of navigating this lifetime too, and choices that they make. I feel like it's a very beneficial thing to know of, wow, from what I'm hearing from the mediums that talk to those that have passed, in this circumstance, this is how they view it once they get to the other side, right? And just to help people kind of have also that little bit more perspective of the observer, and the little more of a connection to spirit, and know and trust that everything happens in divine timing in the way that it should, and so that people actually can engage and stay living on this side, and to help people work through, like with my other work, when you're in that emotional resonance of grief. Some people want to hold on and stay in that grief for forever, and the people on the other side are absolutely don't want them to stay there, right? At all. Like, and then they stop living where that's not what they were meant to do in this lifetime. Yeah, so that can be very detrimental, because their quality of life then is held back, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So yeah, and in the coaching, we learn different processes and exercise and interventions to help people work through the emotions. So starting at the base of shame, and then on guilt, and shame of who I am is no good, and the guilt of what I did was no good, or that victimhood or apathy and stuckness that people sometimes stay good, and then women, and we were talking about the women, and live in a lot of illegitimate good. So they're all, if I do enough, I'll be enough. And it's like shifting that energy of women, like trying to, perform like a man when they're not, in the sense of, that drive and push and productivity, and biologically, we have a different rhythm. So, I'm following that moon.
It's discussed a lot in Tantra, actually.
Mhm.
The embodiment of the divine feminine, like what that looks. And I mean, everybody's got masculine and feminine.
Yeah.
But like if you're a feminine embodied person, like, it should be sort of like a 60-40 split kind of thing. And just talking about like, that's one aspect brought forth by Tantra as to why like burnout is such a huge thing in women right now, is because they're having to live in like 80-90% of their masculine energy.
Yeah.
And they don't have that downtime where they can embody the feminine.
Right.
And honestly, like for myself, seeing the rise in like PCOS and endometriosis, I do wonder if that isn't tied in some regard to that, through like a more emotional
Everything
level.
is every physical ailment that we have that shows up, every pain, every ache, every dis-ease is all connected back to emotion. It's energy and motion, and it's emotions that get stuck as energy in the body and will manifest in some sort of a physical form. So that's why, like, I follow a lot of Dr. V's work through the modern holistic health, because she does the bioenergetic scans as well, and I've have the coaching for that as well, and being able to correct the energies that we have. But in that system, it also in her work, it's all to do with the somatic shifting of energies and the emotions, and they have different modalities, people who do different modalities, along with, the labs that she does, and along with the diet stuff. And, with the bioenergetics, even in the system, it scans the emotions and the beliefs as well. So it's because it is all totally connected. So it's all encompassing. So she'll have somebody that comes with, a list of 10 things, with the brain fog and the inflammation and the, onset of diabetes and dementia, and even at times, who can shift their trauma and their emotions, as well as clean up their gut health, and maybe get rid of some dairy, or get rid of the gluten, or get their health back in their gut in some form, whatever it might be, that's creating these issues, or wheat or whatever. Like, they do all the different wheat zoomer, gut zoomer, brain zoomer, that kind of thing, and work on the emotional trauma or event that may be held in the body, and see a huge shift. I mean, typically, and the toxins and the chemicals in the food, the chemicals that have been sprayed everywhere, and molds and funguses. Yeah. So there's like a whole plethora of things that kind of come together that completely, you can shift your health. So the pill for a nail, will start to see that go away too. And when I was talking about medical technologies, I in the mediumship, I listened to a fellow that is, the CRISPR technology, the gene editing technology is coming very quickly too, and we'll see a lot.
I'm pretty sure it's already here. Not
it's here. Wider use, but just not as mainstream. Like, it'd be very mainstream in the next 5 to 10 years.
One thing that does interest me, and there's not really been anything that I've found on it. I do wonder, like, in terms of like factory farming, the like generational trauma that's being passed in animals, and then we're consuming that, and like literally like their DNA is being that's used to repair our own DNA essentially, and like amino acids used within our own body to repair our own body. And I do wonder how much generational trauma we're also picking up from factory farming simply by eating meat. And I know, like, for myself,
all energy, of course. Right?
I know for myself, like, eating, like, if I can get access to either meat that's been hunted, or like meat that's been raised and butchered, like on the home farms kind of thing, like the feeling after eating that versus after eating meat out of the grocery store, wildly different. And flavor, obviously that's one factor that everybody notes on, but I think I think the flavor is different to us because there's more to it than just the flavor of the meat. I think there's a lot more that goes into the flavor of it, like, as you say, energy kind of thing. So no, it's definitely it's really exciting to me just seeing the number of experts that are coming out now and focusing on like the emotional components and how that reflects in the body and in so many different aspects to life. Because like that's the same way that I work, is releasing the emotional trauma from different beings. And people tend to focus on trauma being, like very obvious, like sexual trauma or abuse, or like things that are very obviously traumatic, but people don't necessarily think about trauma, like almost like micro traumas, the offhanded comments to you when you were in an impressionable age, and how deeply traumatic and like life shaping just tiny little comments from parents can be. And I have noticed there's a tend towards pushing to this idea of like, oh, if I can just heal myself, I'll be fine. And people don't seem to realize that, like, you're never at 100%. Like, there's always healing work to do. It's never like there's no end post to reach and then finally you're healed and everything's perfect. Like, there's no finish line to that. Like, it's always there. It's having the capacity and the knowledge and the modalities to draw on to be able to continue the healing journey throughout your life. But people are acting like it's like a race, like, oh, if I could just heal myself, then I'll be perfect and I'll have everything that I want and everything else. And it's, what I've noticed in myself is, like, once you learn the ways to heal yourself and you start healing yourself and you have that toolkit behind you, then when something traumatic does happen again, it doesn't have as much of an impact on you, because you're like, oh, okay, I've healed this thing before, I can do it again. Like, rejection's a good example. If you are able to heal those core rejection wounds that you had when you were from, a kid, then as you're getting rejected later in life, like you're able to bounce back from it faster because you're able to heal it, but also it's almost like that emotional scar tissue is kind of like resilient in a way that it's like, okay, yeah, this is a rejection. I'm feeling XYZ because I've been rejected, and that's like how I was rejected when I was a kid. And these are the methods that I used to overcome that before. So now I'm going to do that again. And it's really just a skill set that people are building. It's like any sort of skill, you're never going to be, say if you're a gardener, for instance, you're never going to be such a good gardener that you don't have to garden again. Like,
well, exactly.
yeah.
And all of that you just said is so important for everybody to hear and know, and that we all have wounded parts of ourselves. Like that's part of the empowerment work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
I just bring the astrology in to help you realize, where we might have those, where you might have more of the wounds, or where you also have all your inherent talents and gifts, right? But it's like looking in to find, at what age did this, and it's, I had learned it as referred to as complex, PTSD, essentially, the complex traumas, the little mini micro complex trauma where, every day your dad come home and he had 3 beer and he said really started to get really, critical towards you. And I'm not even saying the booze had to be involved. It's just sometimes it can be the judgments or the critical comments that were always there. And knowing that, our parents only did what, they knew from whatever experience that they had in their familial and family of origin and their background and their environment. And some of them, it was pretty brutal, like fairly brutal abuse. And so I know for me, I know I maybe shall even talk to you about this, as far as the parent that I was when she was little compared to the parent, after me learning and growing. But it is constantly learning and growing. And we always all have those triggers. And we try to, be able to have that, take the breath and have the observer and being, oh, okay, I'm triggered right now. But digging into the wounded self compared to who the real self is, because we have all these archetypal parts of us that actually wanted to keep us safe. And that, brilliant little mind of ours when we were little, we could have the 4-year-old or the 12-year-old or the 17-year-old that was rejected running the show, and it inhibits your growth and evolution. And you're
Mm-hmm.
absolutely right. The more tools that you have, your window of tolerance becomes, bigger, and you're able to manage to, like, oh, I just had that, hit, like, oh, that was just not a good feeling. But be able to allow it to be a feeling that passes within that 90-second window, and it not be an emotion that you are residing in, that keeps your life um either stuck or in grief or in fear, or even in pride. I lived in pride too, wavered in that. I'm like, thinking I'm all high and mighty with the things that I accomplished in my life, in my previous life, and then it all come crumbling to a pile of rubble, right? So I could learn how to not be totally in that masculine energy all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and allow feminine energy to be more expressed, and to be more compassionate, and to not be as critical as I could be, at times self-critical, but or to others, or all those kinds of things, right? So it's part of my work in the world too. And everybody has um all yeah, no, and the whole, like, perfect word, and that perfectionism and our, Virgo part of our charts, we have to let that go. And
Mm-hmm.
nobody needs to even, you know, be in that perfect energy in order to have a higher emotional state of being and consciousness and live a wonderful life. It's not about perfect, right?
No, for sure. And I mean, like, the more you get into astrology, like, I know there's such a tendency now for people to pull up the charts of people that they're dating or whatever and be like, oh, well, I can't date them because XYZ, you know, obviously, like, there is compatibility for sure. But I think, you know, people use it as like an exclusion rather than seeing, you know, the larger trend that is like everybody's got a Chiron. Everybody's got some core wound. Nobody's nobody's perfect, like you said.
And the archetypes express differently. And sometimes they're more dominant than others, and it depends. So, you know, just like, I mean, even my teacher said her and her husband, there's a certain aspect that, you know, on paper, it probably doesn't look so good, but it's actually created, you know, a good solid, you know, element in their relationship because the energy expressed in a different way than, you know, just automatically going to the fear of what that could bring.
Yeah, well, and also too, if you're understanding someone's chart and you see how they're acting today versus their chart when they were born, kind of thing, you can also see the way in which they've grown as well. And it's like, it's interesting for me because like my partner, I'll have to pull their chart up, but my partner has a lot to do with like communication and socialization and a lot of like really good aspects in that. And initially, like when I met them, when I first started pulling up their chart, I was like, what? This can't be. Like, no way. Like my partner's very antisocial, doesn't enjoy going out and being around people. But as they've grown and changed and, you know, we've been together now 5 years, like I see like, oh, like they're coming into this aspect within their chart.
Right.
And it's not here yet, but like now they're embodying it more. And like it just, I don't know, it gets me very excited. Like one, to see that growth in people, but also like it's reassuring in a way to remember that, you know, everyone's going through their changes and their cycles and, you know, they're not perfect beings. Nobody's perfect. And like when you were saying about like the mom you were before versus the mom you are now, I feel like one thing that I've read, I think it was Brene Brown has said it, that, you know, everyone's doing the best that they can at every point in time. Like, you know, if you just keep that in mind, that like if someone's lashing out and reacting right now, they're doing the best that they can based on, you know, how much emotional space do they have because of how much healing they've done, or are they operating at max capacity and can't anymore, and this is the best that we can do. And I think like with astrology and like with the you know, having some sort of like holistic healing or holistic coaching sort of thing, like you're able to better understand that to some extent.
Yeah, because you might be going through a really rough transit. Like when Uranus, I mean, Uranus was sitting on Shelby Saturn, and then I had the same thing. And it was like, I mean, it affected us differently, but, you know, or so sometimes you just have certain things where you're like able to see that you're in this transit, and you just got to allow that to come through, and then allow the feelings too that are coming along with it, or the emotions that are coming along with it, and know that this too shall pass. Like energy's always in motion. So that is what we have to keep in mind. And it's just so nice to be able to, you know, have a little, you know, forewarning on certain things too, right? And without being afraid of it, because it doesn't always, you know, express the same for everyone either. I mean, you just never know. Something even minor could hit you out of real left field too. So, you know, when the big outer planet transits happen too, you just don't know how they're gonna come about. But if we're continuing, my feeling is, if we are continuing our own inner growth and using our tools, that you can navigate and flow through those so much smoother, rather than like that, you know, jolting fear feeling, right? It's then again like putting on the observer, saying, okay, I see what's happening right now, and choosing, you know, that love over fear, essentially, and self-love, right, over, you know, and just being in constant reaction. And boy, I'd sure like to see some of the really unfortunate anxiety that people, young people especially, are residing with, because they operate from, you know, such a higher octave. And so, you know, us in the Gen X's, we're kind of have a lot more we're not as been subjected to the same energies, or like don't have the same energies happening in our chart, or we just have blocked a lot of things because we didn't grow up with it. But everyone in the younger generations are actually operating, I feel, from this, the sixth sense energy too, as well, right? They don't have the same operating system, and so it feels like, and I just wish that some of that can be mitigated somehow by knowing and understanding and accepting and self-loving, and being able to know I'm in the right place at the right time and doing the right thing, as long as I'm, connecting with myself and my higher, purpose, and a bigger picture, and also whatever you feel is your, I guess, your spiritual divine source, right? Because you always have that. You always have that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no,
You're
that's
not
that's
alone.
a great point. I feel like this is probably a good spot to wrap it up. Otherwise, we might go on for another hour or two.
I agree. Yes.
But yeah, it was awesome chatting with you again. Obviously, the first one didn't make it out because I had some editing to do and then got super sick and never got around to it. So I really appreciate you coming back on.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because I think having a little bit more cohesion as to what we're doing with astrology, because there's so many different ways you can go with it, right? Like having more cohesion of what we're talking about is a really beneficial way to operate. And I think it'd be really cool, like, maybe once a month or once every couple months, get you back on and do like another little like transit kind of update and see, and like for people to take note of, like, okay, what was happening last time you were on versus now, kind of thing. I think it'd be a lot of fun. But why don't you let people know where they can find you if they want to reach out, because you're available for coaching sessions and astrology readings, and I don't know if you do anything else, but yeah, highly recommend Diana for any sort of services, because her astrology reading is fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I actually am doing a collaboration with somebody I met through the coaching too, but who is fascinated with astrology, but she does the oracle cards more so. So we're doing a collaboration for full moon and new moon. It came about very suddenly. Funny in this timing.
Yeah, no kidding.
And it was just sort of like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited that you do this. Oh, and you do that. Okay. Well, maybe and loves being on camera. I mean, lots of people don't want to, do that, right? So we're going to be doing that, and it'll be shared on my YouTube channel, which is Out Amongst the Stars Astrology. So you have to have the astrology word in after Out Amongst the Stars. And I have a website that's Out Amongst the Stars as well. And
is that .com?
Yeah, .com. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And so they can connect with me there. And I do have a Facebook group that I share a lot of things in. That's the collaboration. But if you just go to my YouTube channel, in the notes underneath, I have a contact form, and people can, put in their birth data, or just put in their email if they want to be invited into the group. I have the group as a private one right now. So and so that'll be cool too. Yeah, if anybody wants to kind of connect with the transits, I'll be doing that a couple of times a month with the other on my YouTube. Yeah. So that's about it. And I guess there's if you went to dianaburke.com, you can also get on the waiting list. I'm hoping to work with the Nest system a little bit more going forward to bring into the coaching, but the contact form on the YouTube will also connect you with me to do some empowerment coaching as well. And I can't help myself but bring in the astrology. So
yeah. Well, of course. I mean, if you've got it in your toolbox, why not? That's like for myself, I was trying to, do animal sports therapy sessions and not let the owners know that I was doing the holistic stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of the muscle testing and whatnot. And finally I got to the point, it's like, okay, this is just hindering me more than anything, because like there's so much information that I've got that I can share, but like, how do you bring up to an owner that, oh, your horse is experiencing depression because you're experiencing depression and it's mirroring you? And then they're like, well, how do you know that? You can't just be like, well, just know, can't tell you. Like,
Yes.
yeah, no, I get it for sure. Like, you would definitely want to be able to pull on that and use it, especially in coaching, just because it is, it's almost like a cheat sheet in a way, I feel like, probably, where you
Yeah,
can understand, okay, like you're showing these traits, and okay, now we can see in your chart this is why. So makes
exactly.
a lot of
Yeah.
sense for sure.
Yeah, it just helps
Awesome.
with guidance. Yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Cass, for having me
Yes.
on.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really do appreciate that opportunity, and was happy to go through kind of what we have going on right now, and be happy to do that again and check in to see how everyone's story shook out over the
Yeah.
eclipse season and such.
Yeah, I'm
So,
curious to know how that's going to go. That and
mhm,
the Uranus aspect here, with the full
mhm.
moon, it's going to
Yeah,
be interesting for sure.
gonna be a little ride for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, so thank you again so much, and we will talk to you again soon.
Yes, for sure.
All
Chat
right.
later. Bye.
Okay, bye bye.